Welcome to the inaugural Sustainability Friends chat. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's super exciting. I just wanted to go around quickly and say how I know you all. And so starting off with Théa, me and Théa went to school together when we were like 10 years old. And then Daisy and I went to school together when we were in high school. And then Leah and I went to school together for undergrad university. And then Phoebe and I went to school together for graduate university. So that's how I know everyone. So I would love to go around and just get a brief little intro about everyone and kind of what you spend your days doing and where you're based and what you want to speak about in today's chat. So maybe we could start with Théa.
So hi, I'm Théa. I've been traveling for like the last 8 months, so that's what I've been doing recently. Otherwise I go to uni usually.
What do you want to chat about today?
Maybe like the impact of food on sustainability and the way that we eat, because I think it's a way that a lot of people can have a direct impact on how sustainable they are and they aren't. And I think that's really interesting.
Definitely.
So there we go.
Awesome. Thank you. What about you, Daisy?
So I'm Daisy. I am working for a short-term let company in Scotland at the moment. So I'm based in Edinburgh. And think what I was looking at, so we didn't have any SG policy when I started. So that's what I've been doing the last couple of weeks because they didn't know what it was. So I've been writing policy around it. So when Izzy popped up with sustainability stuff, I was like, cool, that sounds great. Because I don't actually know that much. So why I'm writing the environmental policy is kind of like an interesting one. But because I'm in the tourism industry, I guess like Théa, what you said about food is like kind of everything is relevant to what we do because it's right from travel through what people do when they're here. So domestic tourism and international tourism as well. But like, yeah, the food and beverage industry, the impact of that, the impact of visits to museums, etc. So pretty much everything, which is why I kind of thought it would tie in. Yeah, I don't have anything more specific than that ready to talk about.
Awesome. Thank you. How about you, Leah?
I'm in design. I work full-time in advertising for one of the big like global networks of ad agencies. And then on the side, I do event design. And so I came in initially wanting to talk about sustainability in events, because there's definitely like the designers have an interest in thinking sustainably, but they don't know what to do, or just like what would make the biggest impact when they just feel like they're in the shadow of the travel and the impact that flights and that kind of, and like the buildings already have, I guess, is how they've explained it. But then on top of that, I work in advertising in the healthcare industry, and I was asked to look into sustainability in healthcare systems, and I have no idea where to start with that. So, yeah.
That is very interesting. Thank you. And what about you, Phoebe?
So I'm Phoebe. I met Izzy through Harvard Extension School. Luckily, our program was online, so we had the opportunity to meet people that were around the world. And currently, I'm job hunting. I just graduated a couple days, less than a week ago, which is exciting. Yeah, on the job hunt, just working part-time, and I'm open to moving anywhere. So we'll see where I end up in the next couple of months. Thank you, guys.
Sweet.
And thank you, Izzy.
Oh, yeah, of course. That is so exciting that you just graduated. Congrats again. Also, I'm so glad that you're on this call because I know that you have a passion for like sustainability in food. And also you just did your like final degree project in the beverage industry. So that's super cool. Okay, then maybe why don't we start off with food and beverages, since that kind of links to what everyone's talking about. I guess I can start off by saying I recently just finished a course about regenerative economics. And so kind of what I've been learning is how important regenerative agriculture is in our food supply chain, whether you're vegan, vegetarian, a carnivore, whatever it is. It seems like having really high soil quality is super important because the problem doesn't seem to be that in the future there won't be enough food to feed everyone. It's more that we don't have enough nutrient-dense food to feed everyone. And so if we start now trying to figure out how these supply chains can work, then we can help to build a more sustainable food network before we even have like a problem of real food scarcity. So I think that's kind of my my take on it, I think regenerative agriculture is the way forward for food.
What exactly is regenerative food, like agriculture? Sorry, is it exactly just like talking about soil quality, or is it more than that?
Yeah, so it's basically like fundamentally trying to rebuild soil health so that you have a healthy ecosystem from the soil level. And to do that more often than not, it involves kind of not using pesticides and fertilizers, but instead figuring out how you can harness biodiversity to enrich the soil that way. And so it's kind of avoiding monocropping and stuff like that. And maybe you'll have a cover crop in there if you need it, but it's kind of planting many different foods or having, kind of like wildflowered pastures if you're raising cattle or whatever to kind of feed on. And if you haven't seen Kiss the Ground, that's a pretty good documentary that goes into more detail. And they also have a foundation, so you can look on their website if you need more info about that.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, regenerative agriculture is a great starting place. That definitely is like the foundation of what we need to build our food system into the future, because right now it's mostly like conventional cropping, which is like monocultures, which depletes the soil and then also isn't as helpful for the environment. So going forward, yeah, regenerative, and then just breaking down like impacts of the food system. It could be anything from those farming techniques. So that could be water usage, or like the waste it creates, depending on whatever crop or livestock they're producing. So then that could have greenhouse gas emissions. And then there's transportation of whatever it is, production. So that would be like the manufacturing of the product. So all those things have related impacts. And then I guess once it's at a facility, then the impacts of getting it to the consumer, and packaging, anything that's related to that food product then becomes an opportunity to reduce emissions or address something along that supply chain. But yeah, it's not just the greenhouse gas emissions, but it's also water. You can focus on waste. So there's a lot of different things that you could see for any product, and compare them to other products, or you can like compare tofu to beef, or you can compare one beef to another beef. Like there's a million different like avenues to really see what the different impacts are. But it is interesting.
How do you think that relates then? Because that's talking a lot more about food, whereas I think, as you said, you looked at F&B both, or was it just food you'd looked at? Or was it beverage as well?
Yeah.
How do you think that
so
like beverage as well?
Yeah, beverage. I mean, it's a similar thing because they're also sourcing ingredients, or at least for my company was like they're all sourcing ingredients like that were real. It wasn't as like it wasn't like a soda company or something like that, but there's still like the impacts from like farming. But in my case, it was most like I did like a greenhouse gas breakdown, and it ended up that the emissions from, also this is a big point for food and beverage, the majority of emissions are coming from scope 3, which is the supply chain, and that's across the board. You'll see that. So there's operational emissions, which is like your production, like within your like facility or your manufacturing plant, and then there's all the emissions that are associated with getting those products to you and also downstream, so sending it to customers. And the supply chain aspect is where most of the emissions happen. So addressing that within the food and beverage industry is most important. So I ended up finding that for my company specifically, most of their emissions were from packaging. So I honestly didn't focus much on regenerative agriculture. I would have proposed things for that, for those solutions if those were the highest impacts for them, or like impact areas, but I ended up focusing mostly on like aluminum production and glass production because that's where it ended up for them being most impactful.
That is so interesting. Yeah, it's so important to remember also that the packaging plays such a massive role in the food industry.
Mm-hmm.
That's also what you said about remembering that climate change isn't the only like impact area. I think it gets so much press these days that everyone's just like focused on climate change, and also like the Paris Agreement, obviously, with reducing global temperatures by 2 degrees Celsius also is like highlighted that. But yeah, there are like 9 planetary boundaries that need reducing, and food touches on many of them. So yeah, that is super cool. Thank you for sharing that. That was great to hear.
Yeah, of course.
I think also it would be interesting now to talk about how we can kind of like implement more sustainable food options in everyday lives. I think for me, I mean, okay, well, starting off with packaging, I guess, finding food that's not in plastic is great because it's single-use plastic. And a lot of it, if it's like a flimsy film, just can't be recycled. And also the recycling rates are so low for plastic across the world. And so finding food that's in kind of like FSC certified or PEFC, like sustainable forest certified paper or recycled paper, I think is pretty great, or just no packaging at all is even better. And then looking for organic food is really important because of the nutrient density again. And then also you're kind of ensuring that the ecosystem's a little bit healthier. And they did launch a regenerative standard, I think it was last year or the year before last. So that I think I haven't seen many brands in the UK that have it. I don't know if the US has more, but that's something else too. Are there any things that you find when you're kind of looking for food that kind of stump you or that you'd want to know more about?
I think with packaging, it's one of those things that's like, it's kind of a tough one when you shop in big supermarkets, because you kind of like, as like on the level of a singular person kind of thing, like you go to the supermarket, you take the time out of your day to go to the supermarket, and you get there and it's like, oh, everything does have packaging that has at least one element that isn't going to be recyclable, or all elements that like aren't recyclable. And that the way that we shop in general might be like somewhere to kind of begin, like, I'm trying to say my sentence in English and my head's making it in French, but kind of make decisions in the way that we shop and where we go to shop, making decisions prior to like rocking up at the supermarket and being like, okay, I'm going to dedicate this amount of time of my day to go to the local butchers, to the market when the market's on, and things like that could be a way of kind of like reducing buying things by convenience in their packages kind of thing. But then I don't know, I'm sure that, as you were saying, Phoebe, that like things that go to markets, they're still packaged in certain ways and they're still like transported in certain ways and stuff.
The one thing that came to mind to try to reduce plastic waste was buy in bulk. That's like one, like it's still in plastic, but at least maybe it's less plastic if you can't get away from it. And then what was I gonna say? Oh no. Come back to me. I'll figure it out.
Okay. Well, I can jump in also and say, because another problematic thing is that a lot of the organic produce seems to be wrapped in plastic too, to kind of protect it and preserve it and stuff. So I guess if I'm, obviously I try not to buy plastic packaging whenever I can, but if I did have to make the choice, I'd choose organic food over conventional food if they were both wrapped in plastic.
I'm interested in going to like the farmers market near me, because we have one that's like really like all of the things sourced from local farms that are really beautiful. And I think sometimes I move past like the meat and fish and things because of cost, but like just to see how things are wrapped, or how they are wrapping these foods, I want to know, and at least just get a portion for myself and see what it's like this time.
Yeah, that would be really interesting to see if they carry that through it in farmers markets. Yeah. Especially in New York too, because you think of I think of New York and I think of like so much packaging and waste and stuff, so it'd be really great to see if they have no packaging in those markets. I noticed also, because I travel a fair bit too, I love the like reusable silicone bags. And you can go to like bulk shops in places where you travel and kind of fill up with like nuts and fruit or pasta or whatever it is that you want. And while silicone isn't necessarily the greatest material while it's being produced, it's non-toxic if it ends up in the environment. and unlike plastic, it doesn't produce microplastics. It kind of like stays together and bonded. So it's more environmentally friendly in that sense. And you can also put it in the dishwasher if you needed to. So, it can be like super sanitized if it had like raw meat in it and then nuts in it the following day or whatever.
I remembered. So another thing I'll look out for, like even if I can't get away from packaging, I'll look if the company is doing things that are relevant to reducing like environmental impacts in any capacity. So they might have like a little third-party certification on their packaging. So that indicates to me that they care, they're making efforts towards solutions, and I want to support that. So B-Corp is like one of the main ones. I don't know. Have you guys heard of that one? Yeah, okay. But yeah, B-Corp is amazing, and they go within like every part of sustainability. So they're not missing anything, and they're always pushing companies to become better. So if I see that, I'm like, okay, I'm in good hands. This company is really trying, and it's really hard to get those certifications. So that to me is a good indicator of if I'm going to buy something that's packaged. It makes me happier.
And I think as well for B-Corp, as you said, it goes to everything that you do. Like I'm trying to get B-Corp certification at the moment for our company. Like it's not just in food and drink. Like you can look for it in every single thing that you want to do, basically. And like there's a local brewery just down the road, but they're B-Corp certified. So even just like going for a pint, you can still think about it, I guess.
Yeah, that's amazing.
How's that process going? I heard it's quite long.
Yeah.
Very long. It's very long and it's very difficult. I'm literally just started on went for green tourism first, and I got that. I got silver, which I'm happy about. Gold would be better. And then now I'm doing the BIA, like the original sort of like the survey that you do. You have to do that first, I think, and that's like kind of the first step. So that's what I'm in the process of doing that. And then the next step is actually registering for full B-Corp certification. So it's yes, is the answer. It's a really, really long process, and there's a lot of paperwork.
I bet. Well, congrats on the silver. It's like fun that you can keep working towards goals.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
So you guys did get a certification then, or no? Or are you working towards it?
I'm doing BIA at the moment, but I've got another certification which is just tourism specific. So it's called green tourism.
Okay.
Got that one, and then I'm in the process of submitting the paperwork for BIA, and then after that comes the full B-Corp. So no, we've not got B-Corp yet, and I think there's still like a little way to go. As I say, I wrote at ESG policy last week, so we're a little ways away. It's a very long process, but yeah, you definitely know that if somebody has that, they've properly jumped through all the hoops and done everything.
There is a woman in my capstone course doing a consulting project for a tourism company, and she is a big advocate for B-Corp. But I remember she said once that there's no companies from the tourism industry that have one. I guess it's harder for you guys. I'm not familiar with that.
It's quite interesting. It's really difficult because of all of the different kind of elements that come into the business. So whereas maybe a consulting company is a bad idea, but like a shop or retail or anything like that, yeah, you've got the supply chain, but at the end of the day, it's going to be mainly focused on the business, its office or its shop space or anything like that. Whereas a lot of kind of tourism businesses, for example, mine, the impact of our business is the properties that we manage. But the properties that we manage aren't actually owned by our business. They're not ours. So we can ask owners to put in all LED light bulbs, for example, but it's not something that we have full control over.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, so what we're doing is just saying you need to sort this out by 2025 or whatever it is. You put in place those targets for owners, and if not, then you drop them. But it's not quite as straightforward, which is, I think, probably why. Yeah. I mean, I didn't know, nobody in tourism had it. I think that might have changed. I think
she said there's probably a lot in the works, but there's none that she's known of yet.
Interesting. Yeah. So that, I think that's the real challenge that I'm facing at the moment, even just doing the BIA, is that kind of initial where do you draw what the business actually is and its impact and what you can actually influence and what you can't, but you are still creating that impact effectively. So yeah, it's just like kind of complicated because you've got a bit of a catch-22.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Good luck.
It makes you appreciate the people that have done it, and I've taken on some clients recently that have got everything sorted, like for sustainability and stuff, and like you've got to appreciate the effort that goes into that, definitely. And I think I never really thought about it when looking for hotels or looking for like an Airbnb or anything like that, but definitely having like done it just at work is something I would probably look into next time we were traveling.
I love when people share it on their Airbnbs. Whenever they share any kind of sustainability thing, I'm like, that's definitely, even if it's a bit more expensive, I'm like 100% I'm staying there. That's it, done, decided.
Well, that's good to know.
Yeah, it's worth it. Your efforts will pay off. I think it'd be interesting to talk about, like, obviously tourism and event planning kind of link somewhat. So Leah, you said earlier about like designers are thinking about how to design events more sustainably, but obviously the big or the easiest way to be more sustainable is to transition the building to renewable energy that you're hosting it in. But then you're also mentioning food, so I'd love to hear kind of like what you think, or what designers are kind of, what the design process is, and what you're kind of thinking in terms of like, how can we be more sustainable when you can't necessarily change the building? Or would you be able to choose like more sustainable buildings?
I think that's what it is. I think there's a lack of willingness to compromise on the design, on the look, on the experience, and the way that like it should be in this place because this is a famous New York place and these clients want this famous thing, and like that's a whole part of it for them. But there are many beautiful buildings that exist that are like B-Corp certified. Like they do exist in the city. There just is less of a decision to do that. In terms of food, there's definitely widely recognized that there's a massive food waste from like the amount that is prepared versus the amount that people are eating and consuming while they're there. Like the past hors d'oeuvres and then the actual dinners and stuff, like you walk through the kitchen and they're packing up so much stuff. And at least one designer that I work with makes sure that everything goes to shelters at the end of the night, like anything that's left over, that's a recent initiative. So that's the effort, I guess, to pay for extra, like ensuring extra transportation that's going to get the food to where it can go to be actually, eaten by people who need it. So that's great. But it's like they're budgeting and they're allowing for this much stuff to be brought in and barely any of it gets touched across the board too. Live flowers as well. There's often a lot of disposal of live flowers, and I'm sure that exists in travel and hospitality, all the decor that goes into making places look ready for guests. There's just a lot. It seems like there's just not that much interest in taking away from the look and the experience of it all and keeping it sort of in these huge amounts.
Yeah. Oh, that's terrible. But great that they're doing the shelter initiative. That's really good. I was thinking, as you were saying, I was wondering if any of it ends up in compost bins instead of like normal waste.
That would be another great thing to suggest, just to make sure that like we have the time to separately bag things or separately, divide for the purpose of compost.
I think there's a website also for New York that shows where compost bins are, which is great. But yeah, obviously like the correct management of waste is so important, and like food waste should all just be composted because then it takes up less space in landfills, emits so many greenhouse gases as it decomposes in landfills. It really is. I think that's an issue for so many sustainability topics. Like people don't want to compromise on aesthetics or like tradition. Like it's super conservative in that way. It's like trying to figure, I guess the design thing would be like figuring out like how do you design that to be like the cool new thing, like this is super desirable because it's super green. Like, did you know that this event has no carbon footprint? Like that would be so cool.
Right. And I think it's a cool problem to solve, and maybe we're excited by that because we're the young kids that are care about it. But even like all the controversy that came, if you heard, when 11 Madison Park, the restaurant, decided to stop serving meat in their like prefix menu. And like their argument was that like if we are the top restaurant in New York, or the restaurant that everyone wants to be, then we need to be the one. The change is only going to happen if we make it at the top highest level. And that got so much controversy, but it's exciting if you listen to it. And people wanted, it got the attention of people, so it will make the change happen, I think.
That's so cool to hear about. I didn't know. I knew that they're a vegan restaurant, but I didn't know that they used to serve meat. I just assumed they started out vegan. Yeah. Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There was one that I heard about in Spain, in the Basque country, that I'm going to have to Google the name of because I can't remember it. I'll share it later with you all when I remember it. But they were doing a similar thing. Like they kind of like analyzed their entire like supply chain and realized that they could do all sorts of initiatives to improve it. And like one of the ones that stood out to me was like going vegan, like most of the meals are vegetarian, I think it was, and all of the produce is locally sourced. And they realized that so many of the different suppliers took their own vans to kind of deliver the produce to the restaurant, that the owners kind of examined it and went, right, okay, how can we improve this? And they just hired one van to go around all of the suppliers and then come back to the restaurant. So that cut emissions by loads. I don't remember what the percentage was. But yeah, it's so exciting hearing stuff like that. Yeah, I don't know if it is just because we're young and excitable, but
well, I think we just feel we're going to feel the impact more of it, and we see it more.
For sure.
That's why I think, I don't know, I even feel like people of my parents' generation are just in denial when I talk to them about it. When they're like, what did you learn in college about this? Or like, is it actually something we need to be worried about? Or like, why do these kids not want to have their own families now? What is this fear about bringing kids into the world? It's like, well, we are seeing the changes around us. We're seeing what's happening to the planet.
Right. Yeah, that's such a big point. I was surprised also by how little sustainability education we got in universities and even high schools, I guess, and lower schools.
None.
Yeah.
I don't remember. I mean, as you went to high school together, I don't remember anybody, maybe in geography. I don't remember anybody talking about it.
Well, I remember after discovering what ESS was and then being like, oh, if I wanted to learn more about sustainability, I should have taken ESS.
Yeah, I mean, I did take ESS, but
then you didn't know?
Even then, to be honest, not really. Sorry, ESS stands for environmental, was it environmental sciences and society or something like that? Society and science, basically environmental stuff. And even that, it was sort of more geography focused. It wasn't actually really focused on being necessarily more sustainable. It was just kind of the easy course that you could take and not have to do chemistry or biology. That was kind of it.
That's how it was in my high school as well. Yeah. It was like a AP environmental course you could take your senior year, which I wanted to take like since I was a freshman, but it was also the easy way out compared to like taking like AP bio or something or chem or whatever. But yeah, they went over the impacts, but not like the impacts of like our environment, but not how to address it.
And I think like they talked about endangered species. I remember that and a couple of other things. It's quite a long time ago, but at the end of the day, no, it wasn't actually how do we do something about this, and how can we, like, even as a generation, try and kind of reverse the effects.
Yeah, and that to me is so surprising because there are literally so many solutions out there. Like the solutions to all of our problems exist. Like there's a great book, like I've heard two things recently that just made me think like, yeah, like we have the solutions. It's literally just like getting governments to come together to implement them. There's a great book called Project Drawdown by Phoebe, do you remember his name?
Called something?
Paul Dawkins.
Is that right?
Walking Dawkins, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, okay. But basically that breaks down like all of these solutions that you can do to reduce global greenhouse gas emissions, and it ranks them, and it tells them how much greenhouse gas emissions you would save if you implemented all these theories and stuff. And then the other one that I heard of was about regenerative agriculture, actually. And so this guy basically figured out that if you planted trees, like a permaculture food forest, so permaculture is basically just like regenerative agriculture, kind of like using common sense to figure out how to make food more sustainable. And so he figured out that like trees produce clouds which lower global temperatures, and encourage rain and stuff like this. So if you planted trees along the equatorial zone where a lot of people live in poverty, you can provide incomes and livelihoods for these people and reduce global temperatures and give great food quality and all this stuff. And because permaculture food forests are abundant with food, he figured out that if you did this throughout the entire world along the equatorial zone, you would have enough food to feed 13 billion people, and you'd be able to sequester all of the carbon for like many, many years into the future. So it's like the solutions exist. It's literally just figuring out how to implement them. And I don't know why schools aren't teaching this more and giving more hope to people and like giving them like actionable steps that you can take in your daily life to kind of be more sustainable.
It's not a sexy issue.
I think sustainability is sexy. Let's make it sexy.
Super sexy.
Yeah, it needs to be made sexy. I think that like it's kind of the same thing with what's the word, like building bridges and roads and stuff. There's a word for that.
Construction? No.
Yeah, I guess. But anyway, like it's the same how you have sort of bridges falling down in Italy, because again, that's just not something that's really that like interesting, and it's just not, it's not a sexy issue.
I just noticed that we have 1 minute until this call ends, which is so sad. But if I get cut off, I just want to thank you all so much for joining. It was so great to have this first talk with you all and just like spread awareness about sustainability and just start conversations around it. So yeah, reach out literally anytime and we can connect one-on-one too.
Yes. Yeah, I also had some other points about tourism, so I could just message Leah or something.
Yes, connect. That's what I was thinking before. I was like, you may not be friends by the beginning of this call, but you will be at the end.
This was awesome. Let's do it again.
Yeah,
definitely.
Great.
Thank you so much for sharing, everyone.
Oh, thank
It's
you.
really interesting to see and hear about your ways of seeing things and everything you've learned. It's really cool.